Okay, well, I watched Leviathan by Andrei Zviaginstev. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I can't pronounce anything Russian, but his name is, like, particularly weird. Anyway, I went to see this foreign film last night. I haven't seen a lot of modern Russian films, so I was quite interested to see how it looked, especially because Tarkovsky has such a huge influence on Russian film, as did his father with, like, poetry. And I love Tarkovsky's works generally, so I was like, okay, it's gonna be interesting to check this out. And yeah, you can tell every shot was, like, super slow moving, dollying, really, really long shots of nature, that sort of thing. But the story was in no way Tarkovsky-esque at all. It's a little difficult going into foreign films sometimes as to, like, how translations work between actors, and generally if you have a good enough actor you kind of get you'll get the vibe you're getting from their acting, but translating between languages you just sometimes miss out on, like, subtle, you know, meanings in words that, you know, like, there are certain words in Russian and particularly German that, you know, just, like, you just can't be translated into English. So I always feel a bit sad every time I watch a foreign film, particularly Russian films, because I feel like I'm always missing out on some little bit. Like, they're really cleverly using language, but it's just kind of being translated into this simple English format, but I didn't really feel that in this film. The general plot outline is that it's really simple Russian family with a really kind of strangely abusive but, like, hardworking and drunken. And another thing I should mention, everyone in this film drinks vodka. I mean, it's a Russian film, so that can be expected, but, like, ridiculous amounts of vodka. It's absurd, and everyone's drinking it, so it's certainly very Russian in spirit, and that's not a pun for vodka, even though I just realized that. But, oh, fuck. This family that lives on this kind of really kind of large block of land next to a river is having their house demolished by a really, really corrupt mayor who will pretty much do anything to get this block of land, and they pretty much just get fucked over by this guy. He's, you know, working totally outside the law, like he has full control of the police. The husband of the family hires a friend who's also his lawyer to defend him, and the lawyer has a ton of dirt on the mayor, and that's kind of where the story, like, picks up. It's just them fighting against the mayor to try keep the rights to their house, but then it's also, like, the implications of that, and trying to fight against the judicial system, and, you know, how that works with corruption and such. And that's, like, really pretty dull. The film opens just spectacularly. It's really, really good looking. I don't think I've seen a bad looking Russian film so far. And it's certainly, like, you know, opening shots, I'm like, okay, Tarkovsky. Very, very noticeable influence, especially later on, like I was saying, really slow dollying shots, and I guess that's kind of like a staple of Russian cinema. Lots of super still, super slow shots, super long shots, though it didn't do the Tarkovsky thing with panning with characters and in and out of focus. It was quite a bit more simple than that. It was just lots of static, really nice looking nature shots, and all shot kind of at dawn of like a really dark film, but not like dark in lighting, but not necessarily incredibly bleak. It is a tragedy, I guess, like, especially towards the end with some shit that happened, which I might go into. I'm not really sure if I want to spoil this or I really want to go into the plot, because I don't think that's particularly important, because this film is very plotty, like, things happening, and it's like, okay. And it really could have cut down a lot on that. It's like half the film is kind of, you know, the main character is trying to get their house back and working against the mayor, and, you know, what the mayor's doing, and all, you know, his illegal activities, and it's kind of about that, and then it's like, that stuff's really not very interesting. Like, it's just kind of things happening. It's really, like, kind of by the book, like, weirdly by the book. You know, most art films or most foreign films will kind of do something different, and then that's, you know, like, accentuated by the visuals being really nice. But the first half of the film just feels like someone wrote a really basic script about, you know, like a coming-of-age story and, you know, fighting for your rights, but then it's just shot, like, really nicely, kind of out of nowhere. But then about halfway through the film, the film's like, oh wait, I should probably have themes. And then it brings in all these like really interesting religious themes. It starts doing, particularly there's this one visual parallel. Koilev, who is the husband of the family, his son Roma often hangs out with a bunch of like street kids in this old abandoned church, which is really like nicely shot the way they do it. It's like this broken down rubble kind of church, and they sit in this like hole in the ground with a fire, and it's just on a hill, and you can just see the warmth of the fire, the glow of the fire in the dark, and there's like a really like quite a few nice shots of it, and particularly inside the church where it's just kind of cracked walls with paintings and cracked walls with like church paintings on them, and you know they've like been scratched away and destroyed by the rubble, and that's really interesting to look at. It kind of decides it needs to have like religious themes about in like the morality of religion and how you can justify actions with the religion, because there's kind of this plot twist, which I think I'll go into. So spoiler territory here, if you're gonna go see it, which I would recommend seeing it, it's not fantastic, but it's certainly worth seeing, definitely worth seeing. So, spoilers now. Okay, so there is a bit of a plot twist at the end, a little bit, but it's more like a thematic plot twist. I don't really know how that works, but it's quite clever, and I really kind of like the way they did it, because the entire time it's kind of implied that because the mayor is really corrupt, he's just in it for wealth, and the whole time throughout the film he's meeting up with this priest, who's kind of this weird, like, enigmatic figure, kind of not, like, kind of ghostly. He just kind of appears, kind of Christ-like, actually, but, he appears and he's talking with the mayor, and the mayor is trying to explain, you know, he's trying to justify his actions, and, you know, the mayor is, like, essentially threatening to kill people. He kidnaps, Koilev's lawyer, who's also his friend, and threatens to kill him, because he knows he has dirt on him, and pretty much his lawyer is like, look, I have a folder full of blackmail. If you demolish our house, we're just gonna, well, you know, show all the dirt we have on you. And so then he threatens to kill him, and then that's kind of the end of that plot line. Like, the whole them having their house seized, it just kind of ends with that, and then the film just does other stuff, so I'm kind of like, it's a little unnecessary to, like, have that. And the film is about 2.5 hours long, and it really feels like 2.5 hours. They very definitely could have cut out, like, a lot of the stuff at the beginning. It's just very plot. It's just people doing things, and it's kind of like, let's hurry this up. This isn't necessary, like, this doesn't mean anything for the characters, it's just kind of people going through the motions for the sake of it. Which is a shame, because I really would have wanted to see more thematic stuff in the end. Like, it's implied the entire time that the mayor is demolishing their house for the sake of building a giant mansion or some, like, other vanity project, but it turns out the entire time he's actually demolishing it to build a church. This really, really nice church that the priest ends up speaking in at the end, and that's pretty much the final scene of the film. It is a little ham-fisted in that they're like, this is the message of the film. But essentially what happens is, the mayor is implied to have framed Koilev for killing his wife. It's implied a mix between she commits suicide because her son hates her and she's gonna lose her house, or her husband kills her, Koilev kills her. Like, that's always a possibility. Although it's really heavily implied that the mayor kills her, it's still left ambiguous as to whether or not he did. But it is really interesting that in the end, the mayor builds a church instead of a mansion. And, you know, you see, like, the priest who you've met throughout the film, he's talked to the mayor several times, and there's a scene where he talks to Koilev after his wife is dead, his house is being demolished, and he's, you know, asking, like, why God, why me? And then the priest tells the story of Job and the Leviathan, and that's kind of where, like, that ties back in with the actual, like, title of the film. And I'll kind of get into that a bit later. I thought naming the film Leviathan was a little bit pretentious. Like, it doesn't really have that much significance to the film. But anyway, with the church building, you don't really get, it's a very nice, like, visual reveal of it, because there are lots of shots of where their house is on this, like, little peninsula with this, you know, like, big lake running out next to it, and you see everyone inside this really nice looking church with the priest. There's this visual match where there's this one shot where Koilev is in the abandoned church with the street kids looking for his son, and he looks up, and it's like a shot of the you know, like, the dome of the church and this, like, center, you know, circle point at the top. And then they do a visual match with that when the mayor is in the church with the priest right at the end. So you don't actually know that the church at the end has been built on their house until there's an exterior shot and you can see that it's on the peninsula, and you're like, okay, that's so strange, because the mayor pretty much justified potentially murdering Koilev's wife and, threatening to kill people and, abusing his powers and, being corrupt for the sake of building a church. So it does kind of delve into, like, religious justification for events and how far you can go for that, and if that should, like, transcend law, but that's really brief in the film, like, right at the end, and a lot of it's purely visual, and I really like that they kind of went for that approach. It's a little ham-fisted, where the priest is kind of explaining to you, like, these are the themes, but it's also not super-duper character dialogue-driven like a Tarkovsky film, where the characters, like, talk about, their, like, metaphysical, existential issues. It's very, brief, if not kind of like, these are the themes. Hello. On the film being called Leviathan, it's a very small part of the film. Like, the first time we see it, it's generally referring to, like, a whale that's in the film, or the carcass of a whale. This is the bones of a whale on a beach. Roma, Koilev's son, runs there after he sees Koilev fucking his wife in the basement while they're moving house, and then he sits there and, like, runs down to the beach because he's really mad. Later, Koilev's wife is, contemplating suicide, and she's out in the water, and then she sees a whale, but it doesn't really have a lot of meaning up to that point. It's just kind of, like, there as abstract symbolism or something, and I'm kind of like, okay, that's the Leviathan, they're doing that, but then they have the priest come in a little while later after Koilev's wife has died. The priest explains that the Leviathan was, greater than any man, and that, sometimes you shouldn't question God, he moves in mysterious ways, but at the same time, the priest is totally working against Koilev. He's working with the mayor, and it's not revealed if the priest knows exactly what Koilev's doing, and he's okay with it, and he can justify the church being built at the expense of, like, everything Koilev owns, and, his entire wealth, his, well-being, his wife's life. So that's really interesting, in that he's talking about God moving in mysterious ways, but he is probably fully aware of what's happening to him, and he knows that it's completely in his control, because he's essentially manipulating the mayor, and they talk about working towards a, similar cause, which you kind of assume is like moral justification, but then it actually turns out to be, like, a physical thing, like actually building a church where Koilev lives. So that's really interesting. But the first half of the film is really, really pretty dull. Like, there are some interesting parts, particularly Koilev's family and friends. They go out on, like, a shooting trip. They imply that they're going to shoot pictures of famous Russian historical figures, like Lenin and Trotsky and stuff. And, that's funny. And there are actually quite a few comedic scenes in this film, like, to kind of lighten it up. So even though it is really tragic, like, Koilev gets, like, life prison, and he never confesses. But, they're like, look, we have all the evidence we need. Though I guess it's kind of implied that the mayor planted evidence that he murdered his wife. But, yeah, it's essentially a tragedy, but it does have a lot of pretty funny moments. Not, like, super hilarious, but, they're just kind of, like, sprinkled about to make it witty enough. But yeah, I was really pretty disappointed in the first half of the film. I was kind of like, is this really the extent of it? Because I didn't know anything about this film going into it. Is the entire, like, 2.5 hour runtime going to be about these people just trying to recover their house from a corrupt mayor? Oh, and speaking of corruption, it does have a very, very definite political undertones or overtones of, the actual Russian bureaucracy. Like, like, there's kind of a Man of Steel, Superman in the church, Superman profile next to Jesus moment, where in the mayor's office there's literally a picture of Putin. There's literally a picture of Vladimir Putin just, like, above his head, staring at the camera, like, for like 5 minutes during the scene, and you're like, okay, I get it, you're trying to make political commentary of it, you don't need to make it that ham-fisted. Which is funny, because the kind of, like, visual reveal of the church, actually being on Koilev's land is, like, really nice and really subtle. And then right at the end, it kind of, like I said, the film opens with all these, like, really incredible nature shots. Wintry peninsula Russia? I don't know where they filmed this, but it's just stunning. Like, really, really incredible nature shots. And then it ends with practically the same shots, which is kind of like all these awful events happen, and you know the mayor can totally get away with it, and it's totally justified in his mind. But then you know nothing has changed. Like everything is exactly the same. Nature hasn't changed at all, and nothing of any significance to the actual overall world has changed at all. Which is nice. Like I really liked that a lot of the themes that they talked about were purely visual. They weren't really extensive enough for it to really like bring it home. Like this film really could have been like an hour shorter. Like in all legitimacy, probably an hour shorter, and it wouldn't have missed out much character-wise. Nothing really happens in the first half, really, to be honest. There are like a few funny moments kind of establishing characters, but the characters are really pretty stagnant. They don't really change. You know, only a few characters change minorly, but not noticeable enough that you'd really need, you know, that first hour and a half to really, you know, set up the character arcs. So it's definitely worth a watch, though, definitely. It's certainly a good film. I think I'm yet to see a Russian film or book that doesn't have religious overtones. Like every Russian thing I think I've ever watched. Actually, no, maybe besides... Oh no, Come and See actually has religious themes. I did like, though, that it didn't fully copy Tarkovsky, like, to a ridiculous degree. It's shot really nicely in its own way, but, you know, certainly it is Russian. Like, identifiably, incredibly slow shots. Particularly, there's this one scene where, you know, they're demolishing Koilev's house near the end, and they're actually, like, destroying this house. The camera's still dollying really, really slowly, and while this, you know, bulldozer is just, like, clawing through Koilev's house and just, like, whacking shit off. You know, you can only film that once, so that was quite impressive to watch. The music was generally pretty sparse, but, you know, subtle enough that it was, you know, to good effect. Really, really, really good scenery, great choice of location, kind of really fits in. It's like this grey, misty, kind of peninsula, snowy ghost town kind of vibe, and that really fits with it. And a lot of the character interactions were really interesting to watch, especially with Koilev. Koilev's just fully nuts. Everyone is a drunken Russian. Lots of sicko blyats to be heard. And yeah, overall, really decent, though I would have liked to see more out of it thematically. It's a shame that they didn't explore the interesting themes that they had more, especially through the first half. That's my thoughts of it. What did you think of it? And bid farewell.
Electric future, this night real like the universal light. All I do is that your future is reality, and you turn to me. Electric future, and see the universe reflecting to me. All I am, oh, not without your reflective future.